Good morning and welcome to Get Licensed to Build. This is a free online workshop for those who want to get their California contractor's license. Our goal this morning is to go through all the parts of the license application and give you practical tips to help you complete it correctly and to give you every opportunity to demonstrate your experience and qualifications to get your California contractor's license. We will also help you get ready for your licensing exams and give you a link to a video that shows you exactly what to expect on your test day. Today's webcast is presented by the Contractor State License Board, the government agency responsible for regulating California's construction industry. I'm Dana D'Onofrio from the CSLB's License Verification Unit. Joining us is Ron James from CSLB's License Verification Unit. Good morning, Ron. If you're watching right now on either YouTube Live or Facebook Live and want to ask questions, you'll need to join us on WebEx. There's a banner with the link on the top of our homepage, www.cslb.ca.gov. That is also where you can download this presentation to follow along. The presentation file includes clickable bonus links that appear on slides throughout this workshop. We're going to present a lot of information today, so don't worry if you don't get it all. We will archive the video of this workshop and put it on our YouTube channel so you can go back and watch again. To ask a question on WebEx, use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, on the bottom right of your screen. And please make sure to send your questions to all panelists. Finally, we tend to get a lot of questions during these workshops on how you document your work experience and what credit you can get for your education or military service. Those questions are fine, but we would ask that you wait to send us those questions until after you see that part of this workshop. We will go through your questions at the end of our presentation, which should last about 45 minutes.
The information obtained during this webcast is not, nor is intended to be legal advice. While this webcast contains general information, including legal guidelines for contractor license application, it does not contain definitive statements of the law and may not reflect the most current legal developments in the construction industry. Such guidelines communicated or discussed during the webcast are for informational purposes only. If you have questions about the application of the law for specific situations, you should contact an attorney who is familiar with the California construction law, or review the latest edition of the CSLB publication, California Contractors License Law and Reference Book. You can download it for free on the CSLB website or purchase it directly from the publisher LexisNexis. There are links for both at the bottom of the screen.
Here is a list of what we are going to cover today. We will take you through the process for applying for your California contractor's license. First, who needs a license? Why get a contractor's license? The minimum qualifications you'll need to get a license and what credits you might qualify for. The types of business entities. The different CSLB license classifications, including our new B2 residential remodeling classification. We will spend a lot of time giving you tips on how to help fill out your applications, including how to demonstrate your work experience to meet the minimum qualifications. Fingerprint requirements for a criminal background check. We will help you get ready for the exam or exams you'll need to pass in order to get your license. And finally, the other things you'll need to have in place before your license is issued, things like bonds and in your insurance.
First, we'll look at who needs a license. Here in California, a state contractor's license is needed for all construction projects priced at $500 or more. That total includes both labor and materials, no matter who purchases the materials. The law doesn't let you break down a project into $499 pieces. It's the entire project. Also, you can't charge an hourly rate to get around the $500 threshold. If the hourly cost times the number of hours for the job totals $500 or more, you need a contractor's license. So what is the definition of a contractor? The definition comes from the state's Business and Professional Code. In this case, it's section 7026.1. We've got a link to that code at the top of the page if you downloaded the presentation. I'll read the entire code, but pay special attention to the part we underlined. A contractor is any person, consultant to an owner-builder, firm, association, organization, partnership, business trust, corporation, or company who or which undertakes, offers to undertake, purports to have the capacity to undertake, or submits a bid to construct any building or home improvement project or part thereof. In other words, you don't have to do the work to break the law. You must have a contractor's license just to advertise that you can do the construction work, or even to give a bid for a construction job if the bid totals $500 or more.
So you may be asking yourself, why should I get a license? Here are a few good reasons. First, you can take pride in being a licensed professional. It shows you've taken the steps to get licensed and you are serious about your career choice. It allows you to make valuable contributions to your local community. Unlicensed contractors must operate in the shadows and cannot help make their community a better place to live. Next, it allows you to get paid for the work that you do. There is value to the work done by a licensed professional. Being licensed also gives you legal options if customers don't pay you. Unlicensed contractors do not have a legal right to take someone to court to get paid because the work required a license and they weren't licensed to do the work in the first place. Also, you would be able to use the mechanics lien law. Next, you don't have to look over your shoulder with fear of getting caught. Contracting without a valid California license can lead to misdemeanor charges. Those caught face a first offense sentence of up to 6 months in jail and or a $5,000 fine and potential administrative fines anywhere between $200 to $15,000. Subsequent violations can result in increased criminal penalties and fines. In addition, you may face felony charges if you contract without a license when one is required in a state or federally declared disaster area, or if you try to pass yourself off as a licensed contractor by illegally using a license number. Remember, there are no educational requirements to get a license. Also, you do not have to go to a license preparation school to get your contractor's license.
So what do you need to get a license? First, it's important to understand that CSLB does not license individuals. We license companies or businesses, also called entities. Many entities are one-person operations, but know that every entity, even a one-person operation, must have a qualifier. That's someone who has the minimum experience and is responsible for the operations of the company. Here's a short list of minimum qualifications you will need. You must be at least 18 years of age. You must have either a valid Social Security number or a valid Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, or ITIN. You can qualify the license in one of two ways. First, you can qualify the license by having at least 4 years of experience within the last 10 years as a journeyman, foreperson, supervising employee, or contractor in the trade being applied for. Or you can also get a qualifier for the license who has that required experience. We will spend time talking about how you can demonstrate your experience on your application later in this presentation.
It may be possible for you to substitute your education, technical training, and apprenticeship training for some of the required experience. We tend to get a lot of questions on this. First, CSLB cannot prejudge your experience. Due to the number of applications we receive and process every month, we do not have the staff time that would be needed to prejudge your experience. We can only review your documents after you apply for your license. Next, to get education credit, the coursework must be directly related to the work you will be doing as a contractor. Your education cannot be substituted for more than 3 years or 36 months of the required experience, meaning you will need to have at least 1 year of practical experience if you get the full 36 months of education credit. To apply for education credit, you must provide CSLB with written documentation. That means a copy of any apprenticeship completion certificates you earned, or get official technical school or college transcripts. Have your transcripts mailed to you. Do not open the envelope. Leave it sealed and include it with your CSLB applications packet. Note that high school courses will not earn you any credit towards your contractor's license.
If you're looking to get education credits to meet the 4 years or 48 months of experience, you'll need to get your transcripts first. This is the kind of credit you can expect to receive for your education. Note that for some areas, we are only giving you averages. You will see that your credit will be determined on a case-by-case basis. We're not going to be able to give you any more guidance than what you see on this slide. So our best advice is do not rely on the combination of your experience and education credits to barely hit the 4-year experience mark. There is always the real possibility you will not get as much education credit as you were hoping. Let's go through the chart from the most credit you can get to the best, or to the least. The most education credit you can get is for a Bachelor of Science degree in construction management. That degree will get you the full 36 months of credit. Next is a master's or bachelor's degree in business or a law degree. Any one of those will get you 24 months of credit. An associate in science degree in construction management will get you 18 months credit. A bachelor's degree in some other major will get you an average of 18 months credit. An associate degree in a major besides construction management will get you an average of 6 months credit. Credit for individual college classes is given on a case-by-case basis, usually with a maximum of 6 months credit. Apprenticeship completion certificates will get you 24 to 36 months, depending on the classification of the program. For example, a sheet metal worker apprenticeship gets you 24 months credits for the C20, HVAC, or C43 sheet metal classifications only. Alignment apprenticeships get you 36 months in C7, low voltage, and C10, electrical classifications only. If you have transcripts for other technical training you've taken, you might be able to get some minimal credit as well. Again, don't use your education credits to try and squeak by the 4 years or 48 months requirement.
If you served in the military, some of that service might count as well. On the bottom of the page, you'll see a bonus link to our CSLB Military Application Assistance Program where you can learn more. The license qualifier must also pass 2 different exams, both taken on a computer at one of CSLB's authorized test centers. One exam is on the California business law. The other is in the specific trade covered by the license. We also have limited specialty licenses, which we will discuss later. Those licenses only require the qualifier to take the law and business exam. As we mentioned, the qualifier is the one who must take and pass the required exams or qualify for a waiver. We are not going to spend a lot of time on a waiver, only to note that you might be able to request a waiver from taking one or both exams in very specific situations. We recommend that you look at the CSLB website for more information on those specific situations. We have included a bonus link at the bottom of the page. The qualifier must also undergo a criminal background check. We will go more in depth on that in a few minutes. After the license is issued, the qualifier must be in a position to exercise direct supervision and control of the company's operations. They are also responsible for all workmanship issues. It is also important to note that if you are trying to get a B general building contractor's license and you hire subcontractors to work under you, you are responsible as the project's prime contractor for the work that they do.
The next thing you're going to need to determine before applying for your license is what type of entity your business will be. There are 4 types. First is a sole ownership, where the owner or responsible managing employee may serve as the license qualifier. Just about 2/3 of the contracting businesses in California are sole ownerships. Second, a corporation where either of the current officers designated as the responsible managing officer or the responsible managing employee may serve as the qualifier. Just under 1/3 of our licenses are corporations. A distant third is a partnership where either of the general partners or a responsible managing employee may serve as the qualifier. That's 2% of our licenses. Finally, a limited liability company, or LLC, where a responsible managing member, responsible managing manager, a responsible managing officer, or a responsible managing employee may serve as the qualifier. About 1.5% of California construction companies are LLCs.
Now let's talk about license classifications. A contractor's license can include multiple classifications, although you must select one when filling your application. While there are more than 40 license classifications in California, they all fall under 3 distinct categories. There is a bonus link to our classifications list at the bottom of the screen. First is Class A, or general engineering contractors. These are contractors who deal with fixed works that require specialized engineering, knowledge, and skill. A contractors are the ones who build projects such as freeways, skyscrapers, and dams. Today, there are over 19,000 A contractors in the state of California. Next is Class B, or general building contractors. This is the largest class of contractors in California with more than 133,000. B contractors have a principal business dealing with any structure built, being built, or to be built that requires as part of its construction at least 2 unrelated building trades or crafts. In other words, a B contractor shouldn't take a prime contract for any project involving trades other than framing or carpentry, unless the prime contract requires at least 2 unrelated building trades other than framing or carpentry. There are no limitations on B contractors to stop them from taking on projects that only include framing or carpentry. The final class is C, or specialty contractors. These licenses are for construction work that require a special skill and whose principal contracting business involves the use of specialized building trades or crafts. Examples from this class include the C10 electrical contractors, C20 HVAC contractors, C27 landscaping contractors, C36 plumbing contractors, C39 roofing contractors, C46 solar contractors, and the C53 swimming pool contractors, just to name a few. There are also 30 limited specialty classes under the C61 classification. These include the C61, D34 prefabricated equipment class. More than 209,000 contractors hold a C license in California.
CSLB's newest licensing classification is called the B2 Residential Remodeling Classification. The B2 allows contractors who don't have structural framing experience to get a license with CSLB. Here's what interested applicants need to know. A B2 license holder must engage in 3 or more trades or crafts on residential projects. B2 licensees also are limited to work on existing residential wood frame structures. There are some things B2 license holders cannot do. They cannot make structural alterations to load-bearing partitions and walls. They cannot install or extend electrical or plumbing systems. They can make modifications to existing systems, for example, installing recessed lighting or alter plumbing for 2 shower heads. A B2 license also cannot install or replace an HVAC system. Like all other CSLB licenses, B2 applicants, licensees must comply with CSLB's experience, examination, license bond, and workers' compensation insurance requirements. If you have more questions about the B2 license, email the classifications deputy at classifications@cslb.ca.gov.
When you are ready to apply for a license, here are the 2 forms you will need. On the left is the license application. On the right is a certification of work experience. You can get these forms on the CSLB website. There is a bonus link on the left side of the page, so be sure to download this presentation. We will give you a closer look at the different sections of these forms a little later.
Okay, now let's break down the steps of the application process. First, identify who will be the qualifier for your license. That person will be responsible for exercising direct supervision and control of the company. If you're using an RME or a responsible managing employee as your qualifier, determine if he or she can qualify for an exam waiver. Be aware of companies you pay to connect you with a licensed qualifier. In some cases, these qualifiers cannot exercise the direct supervision needed, or they aren't willing or don't understand their role as a qualifier. Next, make sure you complete the correct application. There are two options: application for original contractor's license and application for original contractor's license examination waiver. We've got links to both at the bottom of the page.
The next step is to determine your company name. See the application instructions for examples. Some things to keep in mind: your name cannot be misleading or imply that you qualify for a license classification other than what you are getting. For example, if you're going to apply for a C36 plumbing license, you cannot have a company of John Smith Plumbing Construction, Heating, and Drywall. Corporate and LLC names must match exactly the name registered with the California Secretary of State's office. You can also use what is called a DBA, which stands for Doing Business As. The main things to remember here is the DBA name cannot be misleading, and you must use that name in all advertising and on all of your contracts. Next, you will want to get together certifications to support your work experience. You should do this even if you apply for an exam waiver. Feel free to use multiple pages if necessary. Next, be sure to note if you are a military veteran. Some of your military service may be used to meet your 4 years of experience qualifications. Also, your application may be expedited and receive a possible 50% reduction in your initial licensing fee through our Military Application Assistance Program. There is a bonus link at the bottom of the screen for more information on that program. To participate, you must have not been dishonorably discharged. Be sure to include a copy of your latest DD-214 long form paperwork showing your discharge status with your application. The next couple of items are basic but important. Proofread your application for any missing information. Make sure you have provided all answers to all necessary fields. Second, don't forget to sign and date your application. Finally, determine if you need special accommodations to take your exams. If so, complete a request form and submit it with your application. We'll talk about the use of a translator in a little bit.
Next, let's take a closer look at our fingerprint requirements, which are used for a criminal background check. This is a list of those who must submit a full set of fingerprints to CSLB, depending on the type of business entity. All applicants, each corporate officer, each member and manager, each partner, each owner, the responsible managing employee, and all home improvement salespersons. If you are in California, you must submit fingerprints electronically with what's called live scan. You can get an updated list of live scan locations in California broken down by county on the Attorney General's website. We have a link here, or you can simply go to the Attorney General's website and search for live scan. You will also see we have a bonus link at the bottom of the screen to the fingerprint information page on our CSLB website. If you're out of state, it's a longer process to get us your fingerprints. That's because you must submit hard copies of them the old-fashioned way. Those take anywhere between 3 or 6 months for the FBI and Department of Justice to process. So you might want to consider traveling to California to get your electronic live scan done here.
So what happens if you have any criminal convictions? CSLB may deny your license for the following reasons. First, if your conviction is substantially related to the duties, functions, and qualifications of a contractor, Also, if your conviction involves fraud or a violent crime. There are other factors CSLB also considers. They are the nature and severity of the crimes, the amount of time that has passed since a conviction, and any evidence of rehabilitation that you submit to CSLB. CSLB evaluates felony criminal convictions which occurred within 7 years of the application date. For misdemeanor criminal convictions, we will look back for 3 years from the application date. That's unless the convictions are for a violent felony, certain sexual crimes, or financial crimes related to construction. CSLB denies only 1% of the total applications we get based on criminal convictions. You'll also note the bonus link to our fingerprint information page.
Okay, along with the education credits we talked about earlier, this section is probably the most important of the entire workshop, and the part of the application that causes the most headaches for applicants. It is how you demonstrate your work experience on your application. Remember, the license qualifier needs 4 years or 48 months of experience within the past 10 years in the classification for which you're applying. The experience must be at no less than a journeyman level or as a foreman, supervising employee, a contractor, or owner-builder. A journeyman is defined as an experienced worker who is fully qualified as opposed to a trainee and who can perform trade without supervision, or one who has completed an apprenticeship program.
There's a limited amount of space on the application to show your certified work experience, so feel free to use additional pages if needed and simply attach them at the end of the work experience form. Use as many certifications of work experience forms as you need to prove the required 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. Use a different form for each certifier. Be as accurate as possible. Make sure the person certifying your work describes the actual work you performed and the dates in which you performed them. We will now share some examples of both good and unacceptable descriptions to demonstrate your work experience. Do not copy and paste this information directly onto your application. These are just examples.
At the top of this chart is the classification and type of experience you're trying to demonstrate. The first example is journeyman person experience. The overall theme we'll keep repeating is the more specific the description, the better. Note, the work experience form should be completed by your certifier, someone who has knowledge and has observed your work experience for the classification you're applying for. That person does not have to be a licensed contractor. Our first example is for the Class B general building contractor. The best type of description your certifier would use for journey person experience is to be specific. Journey person experience must include hands-on work like this. Bob performed rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior-exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. An unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades.
For four-person experience, the description must include some hands-on work and or supervisory work. Here's an example of the best type of description. Bob oversaw other staff at job site performing rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior, exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes. Again, an unacceptable description would be something generic like residential general building trades.
For supervising employee experience, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at a supervisory level. An example is, as a construction lead on multiple projects, Bob supervised rough and finish carpentry, concrete forming and pours, rough out plumbing and electrical, interior, exterior painting, and flooring on residential homes.
For out-of-state contractor experience, the description must include examples of work done that were out of state, military, on federal lands, or work for a government entity. Applicants can qualify as a journey person, four-person, or supervising employee. A tip, Be specific about your duties and employment circumstances.
Our next example is for the C27 landscaping contractor. First, for experience at the journeyman level, the best type of description your certifier would use would be: Jane performed landscaping construction, maintenance, and installation of sprinklers, ground plants, low voltage lighting, ornamental yard art, concrete mow strips, and pathways and tree pruning. An unacceptable explanation would be gardening, yard maintenance, planting.
For a C27 landscaping foreperson, the description should indicate overseeing other staff performing the trades. And for a C27 supervising employee, the description should include an explanation of how you arrived at the supervisor level for the trades on a project.
Finally, for out-of-state contractors, the same guidance that we showed you for general building contractors is required. Be sure to include examples of your out-of-state work, as well as work for the military on federal lands or for a federal entity. Be sure to be specific when you describe your duties and employment circumstances.
By law, CSLB must randomly review and verify all the information provided on at least 3% of our applications. Our next 3 slides run down the acceptable documentation you can use to support your work experience in the event that your application was selected and you were asked to provide additional documentation. The supporting documentation should not be mailed in with your application. You will only need to provide this information if requested by CSLB staff. On the lower right of the screen, you'll see a link to the publication on this website, along with additional information on experience documentation. If you look at the chart, you can see the first column is for documents you can use if you were employed by a licensed contractor. The second column is for documenting your experience if you've been self-employed. The third column is for documentation you will need if you are applying for a Class B general building contractor license and need to use owner-builder experience to meet the experience requirements. Here's the next page of acceptable documentation. Again, you can click on the link to view and print this publication. If you do not have this information readily available, you may want to begin to gather it now, just in case you are asked to provide it in the future. Remember, you are trying to demonstrate 4 years of experience within the last 10 years. CSLB staff may contact the certifier of experience or other parties to verify this experience.
One other note, CSLB gets more than 1,000 applications each month, so our application processing staff has seen it all. We've got 2 pieces of advice. First, don't cut and paste from this presentation. Also, don't try to get around having to take a trade test by applying for multiple subcategories under the C61 Limited Specialty Classification. Okay, that is the content you'll need to fill out your application. Before getting it to CSLB, double check it to make sure you did not miss anything. Be sure to sign and date it as well. And don't forget to include the all-important $450 application fee. You'll pay the initial license fee of $200 for a sole owner license or $350 for a non-sole owner license after you pass your exam or exams. Then put your application packet in the mail to CSLB or hand deliver it to one of our public counters. We've got a bonus link at the bottom of the screen with our office locations.
Parts of the application, Section 1, business name and address. Now that we have gone through the information you'll need to include, here's a closer look at the application so you can see where the information goes. Section 1 is where you list your business name. Remember, when selecting a business name, make sure the name that you have selected is compatible with the classification and the entity that you are applying for and is not misleading. If your business is a corporation or LLC, you will need to make sure that the name you provide in this section matches exactly the business name registered with the California Secretary of State's office. In line 2, you will indicate what classification you are applying for. The mailing address and phone number that you list on line 3A and 3C will be made public on CSLB's website once you are licensed. Parts of the application, Section 2, Business Entity. In Section 2, you will select your business entity. If you are applying for a corporation or LLC, you will need to provide your registration number provided to you by the California Secretary of State's office. Make sure to pay extra attention to the instructions in the section pertaining to the entity for which you are applying.
In Section 3, you will list the qualifier's information. Remember, the qualifier is the person that meets the experience requirements and will be responsible for the direct supervision and control of construction operation. The qualifier will be the person taking the exams. On line 6, you will list any previous or current license numbers you've held. You will also need to list the percentage of the new business owned by the qualifier. On line 7, you will need to indicate what position will be held by the qualifier. Each entity has different personnel requirements. You will need to make sure that you have listed all positions depending on the entity you have selected. You can find more information on this on page 2 through 4 of the application instructions. Line 8 is where you will sign and date your application.
Parts of the application, Section 4, Personnel, full legal names and addresses. Section 4 is where you will list the personnel information for all remaining personnel that will be listed on the license. For example, if you are applying for a corporation, you will need to indicate who will be the responsible managing officer or employee, president, secretary, and treasurer. Again, more information can be found on page 6 of the application instructions. If you will have more than 4 people on your license, you can make additional copies of this page and include it with your application. For corporations and LLCs, every person who is an officer, responsible manager or member, or director of a corporation or limited liability company shall be listed on the application as a member of the personnel of record for the license. All personnel that will be listed on the license must sign the application in Section 4.
Section 5 is a series of yes and no questions, so we're not going to cover those here. Section 6, you may be granted credit towards the 4-year experience requirement based on your education. Question 17 asks you if you have completed an educational or apprenticeship program. You will need to submit official sealed transcripts if you would like to be considered for this credit. If you attended formal training or an apprenticeship program, you will need to provide a certificate of completion. Get those sealed transcripts mailed to you, then include the sealed transcripts with your application packet. Do not have the program send transcripts directly to CSLB. You don't want to take a chance that we're not able to match them up with your application. CSLB may grant you up to 3 years of credit based on your education. This credit is not on a year-to-year basis, meaning if you have a 2-year college degree, you won't necessarily be granted 2 years of credit towards the experience requirement. You may qualify for this credit regardless of when you completed your education. The 10-year time frame does not apply to education. You may also apply for this credit even if your education was received out of country. If your degree is in another language other than English, it must be translated and evaluated by an accredited evaluation service that does business within the United States.
Parts of the application, Certification of Work Experience, Part 1. Now we will discuss the certification of work experience. Part 1 will be filled out by you, the applicant. Here you will list information about your employer, where you gained your experience. If you were self-employed, when you gained your experience, make sure to check the box in line 2. If you are applying for a B, general construction license, you will be using experience obtained while working on your own property. Make sure to mark the box in line 4 and complete an owner-builder construction project experience form that we will discuss later.
Part 2 will be filled out by the certifier. In this section, the certifier must include the dates in which you obtained the experience. They must also select if you are working on a part-time or full-time basis. Keep in mind, if you are working part-time, you will receive 50% credit for that time, which means you will need to provide 8 years of experience within the last 10 years to meet the 4-year requirement. On line 6, your certifier will need to list the duties that you performed or supervised that are considered critical for the classification that you're applying for. You can read a description of critical duties on CSLB Description of Classifications booklet available on our website. Do not copy and paste the description from the booklet. This is only to give you an idea of what CSLB considers critical duties for each classification. Your certifier should complete this section in their own words and be as complete and accurate as possible.
Parts of the application, certification of work experience, final part. The final part of the work experience certificate is also to be completed by your certifier. They need to list your relationship to you, their relationship to you, and provide their contact information. Lastly, they will need to sign and date the certification.
The next form we will discuss is the Owner Builder B General Building Construction Project Experience form. This form only needs to be completed if you're applying for a B General Construction license and you want to receive experience credit for working on projects on your own property. A separate form is required for each project. The experience must be verifiable through building permits, final inspections, and other documentation. You will need to list the building permit number on line 6. On line 7, you will need to provide the scope of the project. In boxes 8 through 10, you will need to provide more detailed information about the project. Question 11 asks if other general construction contractors worked on the project and what trades they performed. Remember, this information should be as complete and accurate as possible.
Okay, so with all the information we just covered, this is a good time to remind you that we are recording this workshop. We'll post the video on our YouTube channel so you can go back and rewatch it in case there's anything you missed. So you've got your application submitted. How do you check the status of that application? Here are 2 resources. First is the secured check. You'll need your application fee number and your contractor PIN number to get an update. We'll send you that information after we receive, cashier, and key your application into the system. The second way to check is to look online at our processing times. Each week, we update our website with the date we receive the paperwork for a specific process. So look for the date being worked on and know that if the date shown is after the date we likely received your paperwork, it's likely we're busy working on your application. As you can imagine, CSLB receives hundreds, if not thousands, of documents every day, and we process them in the order that they are received. Be sure to take the extra time getting your application right so we don't have to send it back to you to correct and then have to start processing your application again.
When your application has been posted, CSLB will send you a notice to schedule for examination and a study guide. You may then schedule your exams through the online scheduling process. CSLB has many authorized test centers throughout California and encourages candidates to take their exam at the nearest test center.
If you're an applicant whose first language is not English, you don't feel confident taking your exams in English, we do allow you to use a translator. The translator, who you will provide, simply reads you the exam questions. Question 16 on the application asks if you will need to use a translator to complete the examination and the language the exam will be translated into. The translator must be approved by CSLB in advance. You cannot just show up on the date of your examination to the test center with someone to translate the exam for you. When you have an exam date, make sure you do not miss it. If you fail to appear for your exam, you will have to pay a non-refundable $100 fee to reschedule. That fee may be waived once with documented evidence of a medical emergency or other circumstances that were beyond your control. Also, we have study guides available for each of our exams, included in each study guide, you will find a list of sections and topics covered by the exam, They also include sample questions, how each section of the exam is weighted, and recommended resources that you can use to prepare for the examinations. These study guides are available online on our website. There's a bonus link to them at the bottom of the screen.
Here's a quick look at two of those study exams. The first is the Law and Business exam, which all qualifiers must take, no matter which license classification, including the D Series limited classes. You can see the guide contains a breakdown of examination topics, some test strategies, some sample questions, and resources that were used to help create that exam. You will see the same format on the B General Building Study Guide. We would recommend that you really pay attention to the exam content here, especially how we have broken down what percentage of questions there will be on each of the 5 topics on the exam. On the lower right of both of these 2 slides, you'll see bonus links to the actual study guide, as well as a link to the complete list of study guides.
On your testing day, plan to arrive at least 15 minutes early for your exam. Give yourself extra time to get checked in. Follow the instructions provided online when scheduling your exam date. We've also produced a short What to Expect on Test Day video that you can watch on our YouTube channel. The link is at the bottom of your screen.
You'll take your exam on a computer using a keyboard and mouse. Before starting, you'll see an on-screen tutorial that will take you through the process. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions. You'll also see a space on each question where you can, if you want, submit a comment about that question. You'll get 3.5 hours to complete each exam. Don't arrive late, or that may reduce the amount of time you get to complete your exam, or you may not be admitted to the exam and will have to reschedule. You'll get your results at the end of the exam. If you don't pass the exam, you will not be allowed to review the questions you missed, but you will get a statement showing how you did on each section of the exam. You can reschedule the exam as many times as you need to within the 18-month period, as long as you pay the non-refundable $100 rescheduling fee each time. Each rescheduled test must be at least 3 weeks following the previous test.
After you pass your exams, what happens next? First, you'll need to pay your initial licensing fee of $200 for a sole owner license and $350 for a non-sole owner license. That will be good for 2 years. You'll also need to complete an online asbestos open book exam. Plus, you'll need to file your required $25,000 contractor surety bond and possibly some other bonds depending on what type of business entity that you'll have. And you will need to get your required insurance policy. If you've got employees, you'll need to get workers' compensation insurance. If you don't have employees, you must file a workers' compensation exemption with CSLB. You can also submit this online. Please note that workers' compensation insurance is also required for all contractors applying for the following classifications: the C8 concrete, C20 warm air heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, C22 asbestos abatement, C39 roofing, and the C61 D49 tree service classifications, whether or not they have employees. If you're going to be an LLC, you'll also need liability insurance. Please see our website for more information. Please note that your insurance company or broker can submit your insurance information to CSLB directly on our website.
In about 5 to 10 business days after your license has been issued, CSLB will send you a wall certificate and plastic pocket license card. Display the wall certificate in your main office or chief place of business. Carry your pocket card with you, especially in situations where you're going to solicit business, talk to potential customers, or sign contracts. We encourage consumers to ask to see your pocket license. If you're going to have a salesperson working for you, be sure to get them registered as a home improvement salesperson with CSLB. Check our website for more on how to do that. Your license will be good for 2 years. it will expire on the last day of the month when it was issued. Be sure to put that expiration date on your calendar, in your phone, anywhere you need, so you won't forget it. CSLB will send a renewal notice in the mail approximately 60 days before it expires, but ultimately it is your responsibility to renew your license on time.
Here are a couple of other important deadlines to keep in mind. First, notify CSLB within 90 days if you move or change your business address. Your renewal notice will be sent to the address of record that we have on file. If you're not at that address anymore, you're probably not going to get it. Plus, the Postal Service will not forward state government mail. Finally, notify CSLB within 90 days of all changes to personnel on your license, especially when it involves the qualifier of the license.
Once you get your license and get to work, you might want to hire someone as a salesperson to solicit, sell, and negotiate home improvement contracts on your behalf outside of your place of business. These people are called home improvement salespersons, or HIS. Without an HIS, the official personnel of record on the license are the only ones who can solicit, sell, negotiate, or execute a contract. That includes individual contractors, license qualifiers, partners, corporation officers, and LLC responsible managing officers, members, managers, or employees. An HIS can work for more than one contractor. The licensee must notify CSLB when they either associate or disassociate an HIS with their license. This process can now be completed online as well.
There are a couple of exceptions to note. First are those who only schedule appointments for the contractor or a registered HIS, and bona fide service and repair people. These are the folks who you call out for repairs, including for things like air conditioning, heating, and plumbing. But those service and repair people are limited to the work that was initially requested by the buyer or homeowner. For example, if your AC goes out and you call an HVAC company to come out, the service person does not have to be your registered salesperson. But if they go beyond the repair itself and sell you a new HVAC system, they will have to be a registered HIS. Also, don't employ an unregistered salesperson. That subjects you to an administrative discipline, and the salesperson might get a citation or possibly even a criminal misdemeanor. We've got bonus links at the bottom of this page if you wish to look at the actual code sections of law. Okay, so that is our presentation. So now it is time to answer your questions. So just as a reminder, when posing your questions in the chat, please list them for all panelists.
So our first one is, I have a BS in construction management, and I understand that my education might count toward 36 months of credit. What about the 12 months remaining? So yes, the most you can ever receive in educational credit is 36 months once we review your transcripts. Any remaining time is in actual hands-on work. So you will always, at the bare minimum, have to show at least a 1 year of experience hands-on the job in the classification that you're going for. You just mentioned downloading the slides. How can I do this? I believe at the top of our website, the CSLB website, where it has the banner showing about this presentation, one of the links is to download the presentation as well.
Okay, so before that, I do see a changing business entity from sole owner, DBA, to corporation. They want to confirm what should be done first. Should the contractor state license be changed first or create the corporation first? So if you have a sole ownership first, you can, in the background, go ahead and get your corporation registered with the California Secretary of State's office, because you do need to have that registration number, and it does have to be in good standing with them before you can apply to go from a sole owner to a corporation. So you definitely first have to be licensed. So I would recommend that you have your sole ownership in place. And then behind the scenes, you can start doing the corporation information, and then submit that to us on an application so that we can change your entity for you. So you would send in a new application with the fees to get that going with us.
All right. Does the fingerprint require apply to out-of-country corporate officers? Anyone that is going to be listed on the license for the California license will need to be fingerprinted, and that includes if those people are out-of-country corporate officers that will be a part of the license. Everyone listed on the license will need to be fingerprinted. Once again, they can either do it by hard card, sending it in, which does take a while, or they can come to California, have it done by live scan, which is much quicker.
And as a reminder too, all officers, anybody listed on that application, they have to have either a social security number or an I-10. If they don't have either of those, they cannot be listed on the application.
All right.
Are the examples shown for out-of-state, military, federal, and government entities only examples, or are these the only type of work? So those were just an example of what possibly could have supplied your work experience. Obviously, if there's anything that we've forgotten, left out, you're more than welcome to supply that when you send in your application as part of your work experience, and it will be reviewed.
All right. I think this one's kind of a follow-up to the other one. Do all the personnel listed in Section 4 of the application required to give their fingerprints? Yes. So anyone on the application is going to be required to go through the fingerprint background process. Slide 40. How should this be completed for an LLC with non-U.S. citizens listed as officers of the company? Have to look back at slide 40 if that's referring to the personnel page. As Dana just said, everyone is required to have social security number and ITIN, or one of those two to be listed on the license, whether they're in country or out of country. And once again, everyone on the license will need to be fingerprinted as well.
And just a quick note, as mentioned in the slides, as a corporation, you are required to list a president, secretary, and treasurer. Those three titles and the individuals that hold those titles have to be on your application. If those individuals happen to be somebody out of country who is a non-U.S. citizen, unfortunately, it's going to come to a standstill with your application. By law, we have to have a social security number or an I-10. My recommendation would maybe be to move them to like a director of the corporation and put somebody else in the slot of president, secretary, treasurer, as those are mandatory titles that have to be listed on the application and on your license. What if the college send us electric official transcripts? So we actually are able to receive electric transcripts directly from the college. There cannot be a third person involved. However, they do have to be easily accessible. We will not and cannot, due to security purposes, make an account or have to log in to do it. If it's like a click on a link and provide this password, and it pops up and we can print them, that's great. Otherwise, sealed transcripts mailed in with your application is what we will need.
If I applied and my packet was sent back for corrections, do I have a time limit when my original application becomes void and I must pay all the fees again? So yes, applications from the time your application is assigned to a technician there is 90 days to complete that process. We don't take into account if there is, a 2-week time to get a technician assigned to you. It's just from the time that a technician is assigned to your application. Also, once that technician has been assigned to you, and if you do need corrections, it doesn't go to the end of the line again. You're dealing directly with that technician with getting your corrections back into them. The most common one that usually takes long enough for an application to go void and you have to start the process over is if you are going to be a corporation or an LLC, make sure you have that in place and registered at Secretary of State first before you apply so that you don't have to go through that wait process with the Secretary of State.
How many times is one allowed to retake the exam if one fails? So once your application is posted, which means it's deemed acceptable, we refer you to testing. You have 18 months to pass your exams that need to be taken. And there is a 3-week wait between each time you take the test if you fail. So overall, you have 18 months to complete the testing process. But again, if you fail and you have to keep taking one or the other test over 3 weeks in between each time you take that, after you've paid the $100 non-refundable exam fee.
Is a qualifier required for all classifications, primarily the C61? Yes. Every license will have a designated qualifier for the license. While a C61 specialty classification, those are the D classification subcategories, don't require a trade exam, they do require a law exam and will require a qualifier on all licenses.
How does experience on the financial accounting side of construction apply towards licensing? Well, your experience, what we're looking for is hands-on or supervisory of employees of the same employer that you work for. So if you're doing financial or accounting side of it and not the hands-on, chances are there's a possibility that would not count towards it. We do want to see hands-on. We do want to see supervision. We do want to see that you're involved in the everyday today aspects of that construction project.
And kind of piggybacking on that one, our next question, under supervision, I didn't see superintendent. Is that similar to other supervisory terms? So a supervisor on a construction site can be listed as experience, but what we're looking for when we're listing something like superintendent or supervision is an indication by your certifier as how you became a supervisor or superintendent. In other words, after working hands-on for 1, 2, 3 years, became a supervisor and supervised construction projects. So they're looking for how you became a supervisor as well as the duties that you performed in there.
Can we do both tests on the same day? And what happens if I pass a trade test and not the law test? So I believe you can still take them both on the same day because we are using a testing site called PSI. If you pass one and you do not pass the second one, well, again, you do have to pay the $100 non-refundable retest fee, and you do have to wait 3 weeks, but then you can go ahead and schedule the test that you failed. Again, 18 months from the time that you're posted, deemed acceptable to pass both of those tests if you've applied for an A, B, or the C classes.
If I have a suspended license in another state, would that be taken into consideration when applying for a California license? Possibly. We do have connections with other states for reciprocity and other licensing guidelines. So depending upon why that license was suspended and the circumstances around it. If it's something that would show up on a criminal background, we may get notification of that, and it may cause a situation where they will ask for more detailed information as to the circumstances around that. But once again, certain states, certain situations, that's all looked at on a case-by-case basis.
What if the person who used to supervise me does no longer work with the company? Can he still certify my work experience? So yes, on the certification of work experience form, there are several options to choose from. It does not have to be a licensed contractor. There can be business associates. There can be a fellow employee. They don't necessarily have to still work for the same employer. And they don't necessarily have to be a contractor. So it does not matter that they no longer work with that company. If they have firsthand knowledge of your experience and witness that, they can be your certifier.
Can an A-licensed contractor do swimming pool repair remodeling? Not typically. That's a C53, or there's also a D classification, which does pool repair and remodeling to certain degrees. If you have specific work that you're looking to see if your A classification will cover, your best bet would be to send an email to classifications at cslb.ca.gov. Detail the work that you're looking to try and do with that license, and we can give you more clarification of whether your license will allow you to do that specific work.
Can an entity have two separate applications with two different qualifying persons just as to make sure one of them passes the exam? So no, on an original application where somebody has no license history, only one classification can be applied for at a time with one qualifier. So that means that Joe and Bob are both applying for the B on one application. That cannot happen. And only one person can hold one classification at a time. So Joe and Bob cannot hold a B on the same license. Joe could hold a C36 plumbing and Bob can hold the B general building, but you can't do it on the same application at the same time, and you cannot hold the same class on a license at a time.
I have both residential journeyman experience and residential supervising experience, and also several years of commercial superintendent experience. Do either apply? Does commercial construction allow for commercial B license contracting? So some states do break up their licensing in like commercial B building licenses as well as residential. We do not. Construction experience we look at as construction experience depending on how it applies to your classification. But yes, residential journeyman experience and residential supervising experience, if it's the same classification and trade work, it doesn't matter whether it was supervisory or journeyman, it all adds up together. If it was for different companies, you'll want to do separate certifications of work experience with certifiers that have firsthand knowledge of that work for each of those companies and the time frames. But we don't differentiate between commercial and residential until you're doing things like A construction work, which wouldn't necessarily apply to B construction work.
My old company I worked for is refusing to give me my permitted jobs to show work experience. Will this affect my application? So, Dan, if your old company was a licensed contractor, chances are we are not going to ask for your finalized permits. However, I need a little bit more information on this one. Could it affect your application? Not to the point where it could possibly be, not go through. We might ask for other information that could verify the experience. But why don't you send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov and just give me a little bit more information about your old company, just to give me more background, on how I can answer that question for you, Dan.
When do we submit insurance and bonding requirements? So when you send in an application, either a waiver application or an application that will require an examination, those requirements come after the application is posted and any testing requirements are completed. Then it goes to what we refer to as the issuance stage. They will give you a letter which outlines all of the issuance requirements for your particular license, and that's your insurance, your bonding, sometimes multiple bonding depending upon your entity, your initial license fee, and things like that. So that'll all happen after we have confirmed you have a completed application and completed any testing requirements that may be required. Then it will go to the issuance requirements.
How many years of qualified experience does a civil engineering BS degree provide? I work for a general contracting corporation, but would like to get my own contractor's license. Which type of license is recommended? Is it a sole owner? So as stated in our presentation, dependent upon the classification that you're applying for and our review of your sealed transcript with your degree in it, we would have to review that first. We did, as shown on the screen right now, give you an example of what could possibly happen as far as credit for education. However, again, dependent upon the class that you're applying for and us actually reviewing your transcripts, we can't give you a definite answer. As far as which type of license is recommended, and you say, is it a sole owner? So are you asking what entity should you apply for? If that's the case, that's completely up to you. And you might want to consult a construction lawyer to see what would benefit you more as far as taxes and whatnot, because CSLB does not get into that. However, just to make sure that you are informed as a licensee, how it's going to affect you money-wise. But it's completely up to you what classification or what entity that you're going to apply for.
I received a PDF copy of my transcript from my apprenticeship program, but seems like this will not do. Do I need them to send a sealed official copy? So two different types of credit that you can get other than hands-on experience. One is educational and one is an apprenticeship program, two separate things. For an apprenticeship program to receive credit that way, there should be an apprenticeship certificate that is issued at the end of your apprenticeship program. That's what we'd be looking for on an apprenticeship. That doesn't need to come in a sealed envelope or anything. It's a certificate that you're given at the end of your apprenticeship program. If you're talking a trade school or college or other educational establishment, that's when we would need the sealed official copy of your transcripts on your education to receive credit on that.
I hold an out-of-state master level C10 equivalent electrical license. Does the application need statements on licenses in good standing from the state agency, and who manages that licensing? So no, if you are applying here in the state of California, just like all other applicants, licensed in another state or not, you will need to provide a completed certification of work experience with a certifier who has firsthand knowledge of that experience that you have performed and or supervised with an employee or employer. We will not be looking at your standing with another state agency. Now, if you have the license with a state that we have reciprocity with, you could possibly apply for reciprocity. However, we just have Arizona, Louisiana, and Nevada. Do we have one more?
Louisiana, we just do the B classification.
True.
And then we do Arizona and Nevada.
So we just have three states that we have reciprocity with. If you don't hold that in one of those states, then again, as all applicants do, you would have to have your completed certification of work experience form with your application, and that would be reviewed.
Who is responsible for the licenses, IRS taxes, the qualifier, the entity? We don't deal with taxes or your business structure or that. We deal with the qualifier being responsible for the trade work performed, and that's it. That's all we're licensing is your ability to perform specific trade work in a classification. We don't look at anything else in the business structure or have anything to do with any of the taxes, financials. That's all on the business side.
What happens if we sent our paper transcripts separate from our application packet directly from the college? So transcript, we do have a place where we have sealed transcripts. If we do check it to make sure, or to check to see if the person's whose name is listed on the transcript matches somebody who has an application in record. If they do, then that transcript is sent to the processing technician. The main thing I would say is that make sure that you are checking the box stating that you do have transcripts, and that would give your processing technician an indication to look for those. If you don't send in your application and we have those, they kind of just sit there because we don't send them back to the school, and I don't believe we have record of the address of the person whose name is listed on the transcripts. But you do kind of want to put them together to go hand in hand. If you have the sealed ones, the best case scenario is to send it in with your application at the time of submittal.
Does civil engineering work experience help in any way? Civil engineering is very generic. We're looking for specific trade work done. Civil engineering degrees can, just as any college degree, can get you a certain amount of educational credit, which would be evaluated sending in your transcripts with your application. However, just saying civil engineering work isn't going to be able, once again, it would be what classification you're going for and what was the actual hands-on civil engineering work that was performed that would need to be listed on the certification of work experience.
Does office personnel count as part of the HIS team? More so, does any office staff need to be registered as a salesperson? So, office personnel, if we're just talking like a secretary, somebody who's not listed on the license, they cannot go out and negotiate any kind of a contract without being a registered HIS to that licensee. They have zero, as far as CSLB is concerned, input for that license, and that would include the HIS portion of it if somebody was going out and doing salesperson work. So if they wanted to negotiate, change, make a change order, orders stuff to come out as part of a project, they would have to be registered as a salesperson, and then they would have to be associated with that license. Otherwise, they can't do any of that.
What happens if a licensed contractor does not carry workers' comp insurance? Can it be reported? Absolutely. Contractors who have to carry workers' comp will report other contractors who are running employees without it, and that's what our enforcement team does. It is for the protection of the workers that are employed. That's why we have certain classifications that require workers' comp, even if the contractor claims there are no employees. It's work that is high-risk work and work that is very unlikely to be done without employees. So yes, you're subject to citations, fines, possible criminal charges if you are out there employing people and not carrying workers' compensation on your license if you're a licensed contractor.
Do other states accept California contractor's license? Our licenses are only good in California. As far as do they accept them, I don't know if you mean if you can use them as reciprocity in another state. I'm not quite certain what your question is. So a California contractor cannot go to Nevada and use their California license. They cannot go to Washington. They cannot go to Oregon. It is only good in the state of California.
I know a course is not needed to apply, but is there a recommended course one can take? There are lots of schools and courses out there. We are not associated or affiliated or recommend any of them. There is a lot of private industry out there that will claim to help you with your test or help you get your application. We are not associated with any of them. The CSLB we have things such as this workshop. We have a 1-800 number that you can call and ask questions about if you need help filling out your application. Once your application is submitted, a technician will review it, and anything that's missing or needing corrections, they'll work directly with you, either by mail, email, and sometimes by phone, to see that you understand what needs to be filled out and everything. But we do not recommend a course out there or make recommendations for one.
I own a handyman service as a sole ownership. My husband works with me. Would my husband be able to hold the contractor's license? So what I see here is you have the license, maybe he does the work. That's my assumption. If that's the case, he could possibly be the one to apply for a license. However, again, as all applicants do, it would have to be reviewed, and a certification of work experience form would need to be completed by someone who has firsthand knowledge of his experience in order to pass him on if that was the case and the experience was verified. Just as a sole owner of the corporation, that doesn't qualify you for a contractor's license. So if you didn't do any of the work, I would say that you would not be the one who would apply for the license. If he did, I would say that he would be the most acceptable applicant. Again, completing the application, and then his experience would be reviewed. And based upon whatever classification that you're applying for, and move forward from there.
I spent almost 3 years rebuilding my home with my own hands in a state that did not require permitting. I have spent the last year as a project manager for a construction company, and I have a 4-year bachelor's of science. Is there a way to use this experience to qualify? Yes, any experience you have in the construction industry you can use to potentially meet the requirements for 4 years or 48 months of experience within the last 10 years. So that's the first qualifier is all this work within the last 10 years. If so, you can list all of this. It requires a certificate of experience certified by someone who has firsthand knowledge of the actual trade work you performed. Once again, it's going to depend on what the work was that you actually did and what classification you're going to apply for. For building your own home, you'd need to provide as much documentation as possible. That will be reviewed by our experience verification deputy. And just so you know, rarely does ever the time taken to do the work is the amount of credit you will get. They will evaluate the project and what an experienced contractor would have taken to complete that project. So while a lot of people may have worked on their own home for 3 years doing various things, they will look at what an experienced contractor would have performed that same project. And if an experienced contractor would have performed that job in 9 months dedicated to that job, that would be the amount of credit that is assigned for it. But that's all done on a case-by-case basis. You'd want to submit as much documentation as you can with your application so all that can be reviewed.
If you have a trade license already and want to add a new trade to this license, you just pay a fee or take a new trade license exam. So I'm assuming you are already licensed, and let's say you have the C33 painting classification right now, and you want to add the C35 plastering. So you do provide a new application, which would be the application for an additional classification to an already existing license. You do pay a fee, and you would be required to take an exam if it's an A, B, or C classification. Now, if it's the same person who holds the class who's applying for the additional classification, it would just be the classification trade exam that would be required since the law has already been passed. If it's a new person coming onto the license as a qualifier of that new classification, they would be required to take both the trade and the law exams.
If I have been employed in a family-owned and operated business for more than 10 years at a supervisory level, does this work experience qualify for a waiver on one of the two tests? Possibly. There is what's known as a family waiver, and that is for you taking over the family business. So if you were involved in the business for 5 of the last 7 years, directly involved in the business, and you are looking to take over that family business from the existing person who qualifies the license, you may qualify for a family waiver. Once again, all that information needs to be sent in with your application. That a signed statement from the person leaving the business and a signed statement from you stating that you're taking over the family business. Then they will look at your experience and involvement with the business to see if it meets the requirements for a waiver of the exams.
Can an entity have 2 separate applications with 2 different qualifying persons just to make sure that one qualifier passes the exam? Please no. One application per, well, let me say this. The same applicant can be listed on a license and have multiple applications out there. This doesn't bode well with the application process. Let's say, especially if fingerprints are involved, when was the live scan sent out? Was it sent out on this application? Was it sent out on this one? We do not allow more than one application at a time for the same, for let's say a licensed contractor. And then if you are maybe applying for a corporation and it's the same business name with the same corporate registration number on it, we're gonna catch that also, and that can't happen. I would say, if it doesn't work out with one qualifier, you're gonna just have to do it one at a time. It would be the best thing, and money-wise, it would be wise for you also. Just that you're not paying all those fees because they are non-refundable when it comes to the application fees.
Do you want us to mail in our transcripts along with our degree? So if you're doing education, yes, you send in your transcripts from your college or your educational establishment, and they will send them to you sealed, leave them sealed, send them in to us with your application for evaluation.
You mentioned earlier that you use PSI as your testing entity. Does that include out-of-state locations like Massachusetts? So, unfortunately, no. So, prior to us using PSI, we maybe had a handful of testing sites in California. I'd say maybe 7 or 8. The PSI is in California only. However, there's a plethora of options in different cities that can be used, but it is in California only. So they would have to come to California to test, but there are several options with PSI in California of where you can take those exams.
Can a pool inspector with a county for public pool construction plans, reviews, and on-site pool construction phases, inspection, and final approvals be considered for experience? The short answer would be no. It's like if someone hired a contractor to build a house for them, even though they designed it and they watched the contractor build it, they don't get experience for the construction. Same with an inspector. Even though you're inspecting and overseeing it, obviously someone else was hired to do the actual work. Those people would be able to claim that experience, but for most incidents with inspectors does not count towards experience.
What is the best way to contact the CSLB with general application questions, email, phone number, etc.? So we do ask that if you have general application questions that you do contact the call center, the information call center. The phone number is 1-800-321-2752. When the prompt or when the phone is answered, you can put in the code 129#, and that will transfer you to a live person. But we do ask for generic or general questions that you do call the information call center. That is the best way to get an answer to your questions.
Can an applicant LL have 2 applications with different qualifiers? So I think we've covered this one. Yeah, an application cannot have 2 qualifiers on an application. One application at a time, one qualifier. The only time you have multiple qualifiers on an application is if it is for 2 different classifications, and that would only be in a waiver situation when no testing was going to be involved. In other words, both of those qualifiers had already held that classification and were starting a new company using those same classifications. One applicant, one qualifier per application, especially if testing is involved.
Do you need a DBA as a sole proprietor, or is it optional? So it is optional. As a sole owner, it is a little tricky. So if I had a contractor's license, and let's say I was a painter, I had a C33, I could put just Dana D'Onofrio, or I could put Dana D'Onofrio, DBA, D'Onofrio Painting. I cannot put Dana's Painting, DBA, D'Onofrio Painting. Those are 2 separate business names, and you cannot do that as a sole ownership. So it is optional. It is a little tricky, but your processing technician, if and when you send in your application, will help you along with that process and let you know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable when it comes to your business name.
Will our official transcript be returned once our education has been verified? No, all documents sent to CSLB are retained at CSLB. We do have through our record certification department where you can get copies of applications you have sent in or licensing information. However, all official documents that come into us are retained here at the board.
Is there any specific books that will help me study for the exam? So nothing that we really put out there besides the ones that were on the slide already that give you study guides. There might be some additional information on that slide that states, hey, for more resources, you can go to this website. But not as a whole. There isn't something that we're going to send you to in way of a book to study for your exams. Except for the law and business exam, there is a contractor's license law and reference book that is available online for free download, or you can order it through LexisNexis. But that has all your contracting laws that you're going to need to be aware of as a licensed contractor in the state of California.
Please share a way to reach a technician or assistant before submitting the application. There isn't really a way. All the technicians work with applications that have already been submitted and given an application fee number. But as Dana shared earlier, we do have, for all general information in filling out an application, we have the 1-800 number to help with all general questions. And that's, once again, 1-800-321-2752. So any general questions that you have filling out the application or parts of the application, you can always call into them and they will. If you have a more complicated question as to business relationships, entity things, you can send an email to licensing@cslb.ca.gov. We'll review it. If it is just a general how to fill out Section 3 or something, we'll probably refer you back to the 1-800 number. But if it's something dealing with a specific application that you need to send in for a certain business entity or a situation, we'll answer your question through that email.
Do we have any more questions?
The question for today? All right.
Okay. So that is all the time that we have today for our workshop. Thank you for all your questions. If you have any other questions about your application, we encourage you to drop an email to our licensing division. Here is that email address. It's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Again, that's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. If at some point you need to reschedule your exams, you can get that process started by dropping an email to exams at exams@cslb.ca.gov. We've also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download this presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on the green banner on the top of our homepage, which is www.cslb.ca.gov. And if you're watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you'll find a link to the presentation down below.
We welcome your comments or topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email to social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our licensing division and public affairs office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California State Licensing Board. Thanks for watching.